today, what we're going to do is we're going to make an ironing board cover today. So this, we sell these as a kit in the store in case you don't have the stuff, but we also sell the boards separately. We sell it like this, and inside we've written up some instructions. So these are our pressing claws, or boards, part of that's pressing board. So yep, you can totally do that, Eva. So this, we cut these approximately 18 by 24 because when you're transporting to and from class, if you need to take a board like this, it's quite nice to have it the same size as your cutting mat, like an 18 by 24 cutting mat. And with that 18 by 24 cutting mat, you could put them all in the same bag and they would look after each other. We've got ours here. I'm just going to give you a couple tips and tricks for making this. All right, so got my mat, and you want to use a cotton that's not got a lot of color in it. So these, it's just a neutral beige print. I often just use plain canvas. Not a canvas with a weave, but slightly heavier cotton. And then I cheat just about everything I do. Remember, I'm a firm believer in work smart, not hard. I tend to lay my board on here. The board is about a 1/2 inch thick. So I'm going to show you what I'm looking at here. I kind of put the edge of the board towards the fold here. The fold kind of comes up halfway. Not all the way, but halfway. So about 1/4 inch beyond the edge of the board here. Then I've given myself almost a 1/2 inch seam on the end here. And then up top here, I've got all that's left over of this piece of fabric. And I would probably trim this down, take a couple inches off that. And if I didn't have this extra out here, or that extra up there, somewhere you're gonna have a little extra. If this piece is just barely long enough, then you've got this bit down here and you can make a strap. Mine at the shop here don't have a strap, but if you're going to carry it to and from a retreat, you might want to put a strap on it. By virtue of the 1/4 inch on the fold, I need a seam allowance here on the side. So I'm just going to lay this a little straighter on the mat. And then down here, I'm going to decide what number I'm going to cut it at. And I think that I am going to cut at this mark here, where it's a 5 or a 19. It's a measurement that's actually just irrelevant. Knowing that I put this on the 0 line of the mat, and that I want to cut here at 19. I'm just going to fold this up here in half. And then I am going to cut that at that 19 mark. And then if I want to handle, I'm going to cut the handle. Yeah. Fold that in half. About 2 inches. That's what I'm going to do. 2-inch handle. So I'll fold this one layer over. I only need one handle. I'm going to cut the strip at 2 inches. Nice 2-inch strip. And then my cover. Now, this is a bit trickier. Because I'm not really going to do this part live for you. But, got my mat, the 10 test mat. And then I have a piece here of fleece. It's probably Insulate. And I'm just gonna spread it out. And I'm gonna lay this down on here. And you can see kind of here down at the end. I've given myself sort of a inch-ish up here. And this is a bit too wide for what I want, but I'm gonna grab that up there, single layer. I'm gonna bring it around here. And then I'm going to determine how much I want to cut off the end down at the bottom there. And it looks like I could get rid of up to the 23-inch mark on this mat. If I go ahead and I cut that off, I can use that for some hot pads or something. So I have a nice piece left for hot pads or the like. Alrighty. So if I wanted to do this part first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the board up to this piece, about a 1/2 inch on this side, and on the top here barely anything, if anything. I like it almost even, as you can see here. And then I wrap this up. And you can see I've just wrapped it. And then because this is a pinnable mat, I will just tuck this, and then I do a hand whip stitch, big and tight. So I pull this nice and flat and nice and tight, and I just hand stitch that, whip stitch real fast. Nothing fancy. Nothing too pretty. I'm gonna undo the whip stitching on the end of this one just to see. Yeah, someone used the metal middle on this one, and I wouldn't have, but someone probably thought it was a good idea. It bounces heat back and makes it bad. So close up here you can see there's a beige stitch here, a beige stitch. So just a really big whip stitch. And if there's too much fiber, cut it off, just cut it off. And so it's double here, but there's no lip to the front or the back of it. So you would whip stitch that onto your mat by hand. And then I want to show you, if you remember, I sort of gave myself a 1/4 inch on the fold, which doubles to a 1/2 inch to accommodate for the thickness of the board, which is about a 1/2 inch. So just a good old basic straight stitch here. Take your fabric to the wrong side. So right sides together, you can see. There we go. Then I am going to just give myself about a 1/4 inch of a seam allowance here. Actually a little more, because I'm going to just use the edge of the foot as my guide. Alrighty. So, if you recall, my fancy little corners, I'm going to do them on here too. I'm going to get my thumb rolling up into that corner. Big seam allowance here. I'm going to fold the seam allowance back on that stitching line here, and I'm going to fold it again on that stitching line there. I've got a beautiful nice corner. I'm going to take it off my thumb and put it on my index finger, and then look, beautiful fold, nice corner, hey, nice and straight. I'm going to go to the other side, which only has the one seam, but you do the same thing, you just go halfway. Got my thumb in there, and my thumb is in here like that. Then I fold that seam allowance back, creating a nice corner. Then I take this off the thumb, put it on the index finger, and pretty good corner. Could be just a smidge point here, but I can pull that out. There we go. So then we'll turn it out. What do I got? A sack, a big sack. And so back over here, we're going to assume that this one, we're going to assume that mat is this nice fresh new mat with this hand stitched. I don't want to make you sit through 5-10 minutes of hand whip stitching, because that just seems ridiculous. So I'm going to take our made for television mat, which has the fleece wrapped around it and sewn on. And then I'm going to try to insert into the sack. Ooh, it's good. It should be just big enough. See, there's a bit of pulling there. And when we get to the end here, you can kind of do the shake down shimmy. You know, however you get your pillowcases in. Now I'm not leaving it in here, of course, because this is a sample, but it should be almost too tight, and that's right. So if you pulled, if you put your fleece on, stitch it up, and then you go to pull this on and it's sloppy, turn it back around and take it just a slightly deeper seam allowance. Here we go. So that seam allowance is over here on this edge, If this was sloppy and not as firm as this one is, see, it's nice and tight. It's snug. That's awesome. That's the way it should be. You don't want wrinkles in this because it leaves lumps in your pressing. So when you get to that point, I've got this end here. And what I would do is I would take this one, tuck it in. You can even trim it so it's just a 1/2 inch here. And then you can stick pins straight into that to hold that. Then you're going to take the other side here and you're going to fold it back on itself. So it's just big enough to whip stitch here in the middle. Super simple. When you're pressing quilt blocks and that, you want a hard press. Typically, so you want a hard board, right? So good and solid. And remember, if you put a handle on it and you're moving it, grab it by the handle. If not, people tend to, like I said, they grab it here to move it and then they crack. You don't want a cracked board. I'm going to go backwards and we're going to talk about making this handle. So in one of the other videos we talked about handles and straps, remember? I think this is too long and I would probably cut this in half. Make it, I don't know, 12 inches. But I would press this in half, wrong sides together. Put a crease in it. I'm going to just do this with my fingers. So press that. Then we'll take that side to the middle, that side to the middle, and then we'll fold it in half this way, and then we're going to stitch it closed rather than making a tube and turning it, because who has time to fight a tube? I pressed part of it, and that for someone who's a little newer, a little less experienced, pressed is best because then it's all done for you. Okay, I'm going to pretend we're done, and then look, it's sewed closed. It's a little top stitching on the edge there, and for some of us that would, one side top stitching doesn't make any sense. So me personally, I like repetition. If you see where my hands are, what I do is I figured out where this is going to go, where it's going to sit, and then I keep it here. I don't hold up here, I hold back here. If it's straight here going into the needle, it'll be straight when it gets there. So I'm going to sew to about the same distance. And that may or may not be big enough for my handle. Yeah, yep, big enough for a handle. And then before I had sewed the sides closed, of course, I would insert that into the side. But see, that's a pretty good size. Can sew it in about 4 inches apart, even up to 6 inches apart. The further you go, the shorter the handle will be. So if you want it really tight and not too floppy, you can put it further apart, or just as long as you can get your hand around it. So some of you who have dainty little girly hands, and people like me who have these great big monster hands, make your handle big enough for your hand. Stitch it in the side seams before you put it in. And the written directions that we have has that there, and we remind you to do that. There we go. We've got all the bits and bobs written. You now have a groovy video. So, if you need to make more, let me just, if you want to check around the house and see if you have 3/4 of a meter of fabric, 3/4 of a yard would work as well. 1/2 meter of insulite. You can make your board, and you can pick up the boards by themselves. Okay, so it's the weekend. Have a good weekend. Stay home. Stay home. The COVID cases are spiking, and if you can't stay home, be safe. Get that mask on. Use that hand sanitizer. Touch as little as you can. Just take care of you. Have a fabulous weekend. Looks like rain settling in, which is always fun for me because that's an easy decision. Sowing now or garden? Well, if it's raining, I'm going to go sow now. So I'm on my way home to sow. I may shoot a few pictures so you can see what I'm up to. Talk soon. Bye.